My dad had his birthday drawn out of the lottery, which was the way that they decided who went to the war and who didn't, which for me, I don't know whether my deep sense of injustice and unfairness comes up around that, but I certainly know from the research I've done that mostly it's the people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds that ended up going to war. And my dad, they had a overlaid concept toward conscription that was that if you had a skill that was of use to the army, they had to try and find you, and instead of you just being on the front line with a gun in your hand, they had to try and put the skill that you had to use for the army instead. And so my dad was an apprentice fitter and turner, which is like a machine thing. So he would have been able to fix any machine gun, any tank, anything related to metal and whatever. He would have been able to fix any of that. And so he was able to defer going to Vietnam based on he was completing that apprenticeship. He obviously wanted to do really well because he was a Queensland Apprentice of the Year for his year of doing that. He had very high standards, my dad. So when they put him into the military, they said, "Oh no, we've got no positions for that." And when I spoke to a lot of veterans post, when I was speaking to them for Enemy, they said, "Yep, I was a boilermaker. They had all had skills. Many of them had skills, but none of them those skills got used, and they all just thought of themselves as machine gun fodder." And someone described it as we were just meat to them. So they just wanted warm bodies on the front line, and just plucked young men out of their lives in Australia and trained them up and sent them into war. And one of the things that was interesting to me, I'm not a massive natural history buff. I like to hear the stories if they're told well, but, I'm not going to ever go through it. Certainly not military history. Oh my God. So many people who write military history want to talk about 66-degree gun orientation in a southwesterly. Yeah.
What even is that?
What is that? No, well, it's, they're getting there in the specifics of this is where we think, and that's, oh my God. I was like, what are we talking about? So I didn't realize that one of the major differences between World War I, World War II, and the Vietnam War was, for a start, World War I and World War II were trench warfare. So you go over there in a big group of people, and then you dig a trench and you're in the trenches together. And usually you're dispatched with your group, and you go over there, fight in the war. It's horrific, obviously. No, all wars are horrific. But then you come back together with your group, and then you arrive home to parades, and there's also been back home, there've been deprivations. So people have been on rations, the whole of the society that is actually feeling for you the whole time that you're over there. With the Vietnam War was a very unpopular war. A lot of people were protesting about it. What they tried to do to reduce the impact of having too long a service was they tried to just dispatch individuals or really small groups over and only have them for 1 year at a time. But the people you trained with, you wouldn't often go over with. So you had this really, you're on your own kind of experience from what I've heard. And when you then got over to Vietnam, you weren't in a trench, that you were often sent on patrol into a jungle where any leaf could be a soldier. People could pop up from tunnels. Snipers could fire from trees. There was just an ever-present sense of, I don't know when it's going to happen. And it would be this sort of sudden out of nowhere, rather than, okay, the front line is advancing, we're doing, like that sort of And they were looking for you, you were looking for them, and it felt very much that idea of the fog of war. It felt like that there were really specific conditions in the Vietnam War that seemed set up to create that hypervigilance in a very extreme way. And so when my dad went over there, it was in 68 to 69, which was just after the Tet Offensive, which had been something where they'd taken control of the North Vietnamese soldiers had taken control of buildings, and so my dad arrived 6 weeks after that event, and then very shortly after he arrived, they ended up putting down the camp that Dad was with in the wrong location, which was right in the middle of where a whole lot of North Vietnamese soldiers had a camp. And so they were all in the trees watching them set up their camp for the night. And then on the first night, they set up camp in this location, and the thing was called the Battle of Coral Balmoral. On the first night, they set up the camp. Out of nowhere, the whole camp was overrun by people coming out of the darkness with war cries, and then they had big guns. And so that first night was a battle of all of these soldiers. They were completely outnumbered, and they were trying to get the big guns. And then the first night, the men had to, they fought them back, ended up getting the gun back. But, they described this experience. It was pouring with rain because they were so overrun by enemy, like they were so outnumbered. They ended up having to call an airstrike on their own position. So that meant bombs were dropping on them to try and get the enemy soldiers, away. And it was this ongoing process of first night they came, the second night they came. This process happened for 6 weeks, every single day and every single night for 6 weeks. And it was pouring with rain. They'd have pits that they would have dug. So instead of having a trench where you've dug a big thing, you basically just have almost like a shallow grave that you lie in, and that's your protection. But those pits would get filled with water because it was pouring with rain. And a lot of times the guys that I spoke to about their experience would say it was either, do I go in my pit and potentially there's a massive snake in there? Or, so you're having to weigh up all of these. So that was a really extreme event. So for context, the Battle of Long Tan, which is the best known battle of the Vietnam War, and it was a brutal and awful experience. It took 4 hours, and this battle raged for 6 weeks. So in terms of exposure to threat, it was most of the people that I've spoken to who were at that same battle, which my dad was at, have been totally and permanently incapacitated with their PTSD. And it's taken ages. I think it was only a couple of years ago that battle has been recognised, with medals and all of the stuff that goes along.
That's huge. It gives me goosebumps just to hear the constant barrage of threat. I mean, just even that image of a snake in a pit. Like, do I go in with a potential snake, or do I wait for all these other snakes to come out and kind of, talking about soldiers here, but it's kind of like, wow. Did you, in the preparation for your book, did you ever speak with anybody from the other side, any Vietnamese soldiers?
No, because my focus wasn't on the war. My focus was on how much can war psychologically impact somebody.
Yes.
And so, that would have deviated, I guess, from what I was trying to do in the book.
No, I see. I guess the initial question that comes in my mind is, were they affected in the same way that veterans from Australia would have been affected, given their own culture and context and their response?
I think trauma is the universal language.
Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you learned something or took away some really practical strategies to just consider in the rest of your week. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe and like and comment on this video, share your thoughts, because it really does help the channel out. And what I'd like to invite you guys to do is, if you're interested in people sharing papers and research or to the wider community, I've teamed up with academia, and they will be giving you a 50% discount on their premium membership, where you can get access to my courses, including the stress, anxiety and trauma course that I've put together. I'll link it into the description below, but I look forward to joining you in our next video. Until then, have an awesome day.